Hello, welcome to the New View. This is our March 2nd edition, and we're really happy to have Marilyn Tenenoff here with us. She's going to talk about the work of John Judge and also hopefully read some of her poetry. She's a published poet. First, to just mention who's joined us from the New View: Liz Gold in the Boston area, and Carol Burley in Northern California, and Ginger Matrow, as we've heard, down in Gainesville, Florida, and I'm in South Central Pennsylvania. I live not too far away from Marilyn. She is in South Central Pennsylvania in York County. Uh, I met her through a mutual friend, Mike O'Mara. I used to come over their way for dental appointments, and we would sometimes get together for lunch when I was over there. And that's how I had all previously met John George briefly, but he was a very intense character. And then I found out that Marilyn had been his life partner for a while before he passed, and then also inherited, if you will, his extensive archives, which is now the Hidden History Museum in York. She's going to talk about that. And I want to really deeply acknowledge her profound, beautiful, amazing poetry. So Marilyn is a published poet. I flashed one of her books. This one is called, listen to this title.
You
You can't
froze,
see it.
Alana.
The Am I back again?
Yeah.
Okay. So where did we get? This is Marilyn's her second of her three published poetry books. The third one just came out. She sent me. It's really deep about the purpose and kind of like the philosophy of poetry and being a poem. But this one is called The White Fringe of Always. The White Fringe of Always. So I'm going to read from the back of the book. Marilyn Tenenoff is an exciting, emergent voice in American poetry. The White Fringe of Always is her second book. Her first, Watch the Watering Can, was published in 2007, says Alan Taylor of World Class Poetry. She is a very intelligent, passionate soul whose poetry comes alive on the stage. Her readings are vibrant, passionate, and full of verve. On the page, her poems come alive as well. The poems in this book are awash in her characteristically rich images and quirky metaphors. They run the gamut from explicit eroticism to subtle grief, defiant rage to philosophical meditation, lyrical fantasy to borderline blasphemy. Boy, welcome to the New View. You're one of us there, Marilyn.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so I think first we were going to learn a little more about John Judge and the Hidden History Museum, Marilyn.
Yeah, I met John Judge pretty recently in 2010, and he passed away in 2014. So I didn't really know him that long, but it was an honor to even be around him. He's an unbelievable powerhouse mind and what I call a visionary. I mean, the things that are happening. He talked about monopoly capitalism and things like that that are now front and center with what we're dealing with almost on a daily basis. But yeah, I met him on a dating site, and surprisingly enough, a lot of people knew him through his work, or they had similar interest in his work. I had none. I mean, I had no idea who he was, what he was doing, what he cared about. I picked up a lot of it in the 4 years that I was with him. But people often contact me and want to know, like, what do I think of this or what do I think of that on the issues that John was involved in. Actually, I've never been a political person. So a lot of times I have like no opinion. Like I can tell you what John said, but I have really no thoughts about it myself because I'm more interested in the emotional aspects and the poetry, things like that. But anyway, while I was with John during this time, he had shoulder surgery, like to repair a rotator cuff. He fell, and he asked me. He's writing up a little advanced directive, and he's give you my collection. And I'm sitting in his house, which was packed with books and stuff, but it just didn't really sink into me how much he had. And so I said, "Oh, sure." And of course, he survived the surgery fine, but then maybe a year later, he had a stroke and eventually died from the stroke. And here I found myself. Would you believe by the time we got that stuff out of his house, there were 800 boxes? 800 boxes, books, all kinds of documents. I have 27 boxes of audiovisual materials. It's a treasure trove of things of his. Um, but it's really a massive project.
I understood that he lived in a three-story apartment in Washington
He
D.C. full of books and papers. And that's
yes,
where the
it was
800 boxes.
yeah, he rented it, but it was a huge house on the hill right across the street from Dennis Kucinich.
Mm.
So yeah, it was a huge house. And until you really started pulling the things out and putting them in boxes, how much there really was. It took us, now I went down on weekends because I was still living up here and he was in DC. But it took us with his friends and me 14 months to get it all packed up and out of his house.
Wow.
It was a huge project. So I put it in Falls Church in an office building there at first. And then it became clear to me that either the collection was going to have to come here or I was going to have to move there because it was just too much traveling back and forth. And I would ask for when I'm going down, I'm saying, I'm going to be there this weekend. Can anybody come and help me? And of course, everybody helped when he first, this happens often when people die. Everybody helped when he first died. And then eventually they all went back to their normal lives and I had no help. So that's what I did. I moved it up here. It's now on North George Street between where Route 30 crosses North George and Emmetsville. So on that strip in there, there's a little school called Highspire Elementary or Hayshire Elementary. So now I'm
Like a
getting,
former real estate office, as I recall, having been there a couple times. It has several rooms and like a little kitchen area, right? Where
yes,
the Hidden
yes, it's
History
about
Museum is.
1,200, it's about 1,200 square feet. And as you walk down the hallway, all the books are in the room on the left, and then the papers and documents are in the room on the right. And then up in the lobby, we have what's called the McGahey collection. Ralph McGahey was a disaffected CIA agent, and he gave John all his books about activities of the CIA all around the world. There's about 3,400 books. When they were in John's house, they were organized like by CIA in Cuba, CIA in Laos, CIA, all around the world. I have not unpacked most of it. If you come here expecting to see like a library on shelves, you won't see that because I never had the security to be sure I could continue to fund it. And if I can't, then it's all got to be packed up again and sent or put in storage or so we're opening the boxes and we're going through them, and we've started a set of Pendaflex files. Like there's one for George W. Bush, and there's one for Watergate, and we each and so a lot of the boxes just say mixed archives because when people packed them, they just kind of threw stuff in there. So I'm taking all those mixed archives boxes and putting them in files, sorting them by subject, because people will call me and they'll ask, Marilyn, what do you have on MK Ultra program? I'm like, well, I have something somewhere.
Uh-huh. Marilyn, I think at this point, let's make sure you tell us what John was up to, is his life work. You mentioned these topics and you mentioned 800 boxes. What was he doing?
Well, he had a lot of different interests and missions. The I guess you would call them conspiracy theories around the assassination of JFK and RFK and MLK, Malcolm X. But he was not. He used to tell me that was a method by which to break the paradigm of the American people. He wanted them to see that they had been lied to, and then by seeing that, they would then therefore know better, that they shouldn't trust the government and be suspicious. So it was a little bit larger motive than just the JFK and the other assassinations. But he was an activist, so he did all kind. If there was a peace rally or any kind of protest in D.C., John would be there. He was very big in anti-war stuff. He worked with people trying to uh, get out of the draft during the Vietnam War. Um, I have a file on just about every social justice issue, rights and immigrants' rights and Black people's rights and Native American rights. And so he was into all those different causes. One big one with him was psychiatric patients' rights, trying to protect them from being incarcerated or being tortured when they were in a mental institution. That was a big thing for John. Um, all kinds of, like I said, the CIA was of interest to him. He called himself an alternative historian, that he told the stuff that other people didn't want to talk about. So, but he was definitely a researcher. He even had, I didn't know this till I unpacked the collection. He had different theories about what happened at Jonestown, where all the people supposedly drank the Kool-Aid and committed suicide. He thought that was a CIA activity, using those people to mine the resources and stuff. So he had quite dissonant views, I think you could say, on a believed in, but turned out, he had a whole different theory about these things. He has a book you can get on Amazon called Judge for Yourself.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. And
So
it's got,
I mean, this was decades before the internet, of course. So
yes,
he's collecting all of this paper form. He's
yes,
not just coming up with his own ideas, he's collecting evidence.
yes, yes. Yep, and that's exactly right. It was way before the internet. Right, I just sent 291 of his VHS tapes to Wisconsin to a lab to be duplicated, to be digitized. And we also have hundreds. If we don't have 1,000, I'd be surprised, but we at least have hundreds of little audio cassettes, those little tiny that were there before VHS. Um, and it's just him speaking or things that he taped off the air that he wanted people to see. Protests, pictures of him on the grassy knoll every year honoring JFK. So it's a huge treasure trove. And I talked to several preservation people at museum shows that I went to and so forth. And I was telling them about the papers I was preserving. And they said, it's really more important for you to preserve the audiovisual. So we kind of dropped working on the paper records at the moment, and we're working on not to mention the fact that they can get disseminated on the internet right away. So I'm really excited about that. We just got them out the door about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, February 17th, I think it was. So they've arrived safely in Wisconsin. They've all been inventoried there, and then they will digitize all of them and send them back. They'll send the originals back to us, and then they'll send us a copy that can be put on the internet of all these tapes. And it's he used to do a conference every year of Kennedy's death. So it's things from the conference, people giving speeches at the conferences. There's a lot of panel discussions. He did a lot of work in California, so there were a lot of panel discussions and things like that where he showed up in California talking about these issues. But he's been talking about these issues since I don't even know, probably the 70s, because that was when he was working on the Vietnam War. So he had a
So
whole
maybe
history.
here's where we bring forth Carol's question to get a sense of his parents, lineage, parental lineage.
Yes, his parents
Well,
both.
I think too. I just want to add that I met John Judge before you did, Marilyn.
Well,
And I talked to him quite extensively, and he also was a very good friend of a friend of mine, Dave Ratcliffe,
Oh,
who
yes.
has
Dave is our
the
assistant director.
website radical.org, and you work with Dave.
He's our
And
assistant director. Yeah.
right, right.
When John
And
died, I
so
became the executive director and Dave was the assistant.
yeah. And Dave helped me to format and my website and taught me how to do HTML.
Wow.
And Dave nuclear issues. And so I've known Dave a long, long, long time. And Dave has on his website the writings of John Judge, particularly on the subject of 9/11. And I organized the San Francisco International Inquiry into 9/11, and the first local actions, the first march on our senators demanding an
Oh, wow.
investigation of 9/11. So I've been sort of a
Spearhead.
pioneer in the 9/11 truth movement from the beginning. And John Judge, he also spoke about 9/11. He was featured in one of the earliest documentaries, Aftermath, Unanswered Questions of
Oh,
9/11.
yes. Mm-hmm.
And he worked with Kyle Hentz, who was also a big
Yeah.
pioneer in the 9/11 truth movement, who passed recently, sadly. And they started Citizens Watch, and they worked with
Yes,
Cynthia
ma'am.
McKinney, and they organized a big conference on 9/11 in in the East Coast. And John actually discouraged me from putting on the San Francisco inquiry into 9/11 for multiple reasons, but because he was in Washington, D.C., and I think he actually led the Peace Center in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
He was a major hub for the whole peace movement in
Yes.
Washington, D.C. Um, and and one of the issues which has divided the 9/11 truth movement significantly has been what happened at the Pentagon. And John was pretty adamant that a plane hit the Pentagon. And there's this huge rift where all these folks are saying, no, no, it was a missile or something else. And anyone who says otherwise is, a disinformationist, etc. And I've been uh, I've been convinced that John was right, and
Wow.
and try up there. And that's one reason that I contacted Marilyn, because I thought she has all the collection. He probably has lots of really good, solid,
Wow.
hard evidence. He knew somebody who went to the Pentagon, who was a stewardess, and Marilyn knows the story probably better than I do. But John, you know, I'm really sorry that we've lost him, but he was an incredibly strong, important voice on so many key pivotal uh, areas. And I think he was the head of the Coalition on Political Assassinations. Wasn't COPA
Yeah, he was
his
pretty
baby
much,
too?
yeah, well, after he did the 50th conference for JFK, he wanted to disband that and put the money into, you can give money from one nonprofit to another. So he wanted to put the money into what he called at the time, the Museum of Hidden History. I felt like that was overstretching the point a little because it wasn't really a museum. So I call it the Hidden History Center.
Okay.
So it's down where, I mean, the museum is the nonprofit parent, I guess you could say, but the Hidden History Center is a little catchier name that we go by in York. But yes, you're definitely right about all the ways in which he was involved in. I know the girl that you're talking about who went
Wow.
to the Pentagon and saw one of the arms of the person that she knew, and she was supposed to be on that flight that day.
Oh, you mean a little physical arm? What do you mean?
Yeah, with a bracelet on it that she
Oh my
recognized
gosh.
as big. Yeah, but she was supposed to be on that flight. I think her father was ill. She asked this friend to fill in for her, and the friend did. And then, of course, the friend died in
Oh
the
my heavens. Well,
crash. But yeah,
well, I was attending the 9/11 Turning Point conference in DC in September, and that was a pretty big deal conference. And the person who did a tremendous research, who believes and shows, I think, pretty convincingly that it was a plane. Before he spoke, there was a break, and he rolled it out for me, like talking to me about 15 minutes. So, let's maybe that information, maybe John Judge might have had about the Pentagon. And if that could surface, I think that would be pretty important. Don't you think, Carol?
Oh, that's why I talked to Marilyn because it's still, I mean, right now, it's the 25th anniversary of
yeah,
9/11 that's coming up.
yeah.
And I was I was shocked that they took the area of the most contention, the most divisive issue, and they devoted an entire day to it in Washington, D.C. I mean, I think there could have been much better use of time and resources to talk about other stuff and not have that issue debated upon. But there's a new organization springing out, particularly to target the people who are adamant that a plane hit the Pentagon, and to tar and feather them, and to say that these are disinformation folks.
Yeah.
And so
Oh
there's
no.
it's just sad. And I think that probably John experienced this with trying to get to the truth about the JFK assassination, is that there's all
Yes.
sorts of different red herrings and divisions and argument, and missing the larger picture. And the most important things about the Kennedy assassination, and it's always getting into the weeds and the little red herrings, that is hardest on the truth movement.
You
I have
know, the
whole
larger,
files.
oh, sorry.
I have whole files on bullet number 399, the one that supposedly zigzagged. And people devoted their lives to one bullet.
Huh. The larger picture.
Yes.
Let's
Yeah, I
see
was
if
at a conference once with John. What?
go ahead. Your conference. You went to a conference with. I'm sorry. I have bad internet connection today, which is really a shame. But we just have to deal with it. So, what were you going to say, Marilyn? You went to a
Oh, I went
conference.
to I think it was a peace conference with John in Northern Maryland one day, and someone came up to him and thanked him for his work on the assassinations and other conspiracies. And then they actually poked their finger in his chest and said, "So why don't you believe in the 9/11 conspiracies? Why don't you believe it was controlled demolition?" And John just stuck to his guns. He just said, "I follow where the evidence leads. If it doesn't lead to a popular opinion, okay. If it does lead to a popular opinion, okay." But he said, "I go by the facts, and my facts." And I'm sure that was partly, uh, contributed to by the fact that we knew this gal. I mean, I know her very well. And I even saw a reading somewhere recently where someone said, well, John's not telling the truth about the Pentagon. If he were, he would tell us who this person was.
Ah,
The implication being it was real, because he made it up. Well, he didn't make it up, because I've heard her tell the story and talk to her, but I feel like John did. She's entitled to her privacy, and if she doesn't want to come forward and say that that's what she saw and that's what happened for whatever reason, whether she's afraid
yeah.
of the government or whatever. John also felt that getting all tied up in all these controversies about whether or not there was controlled demolition was distracting us from the real issue behind it, which was, did George Bush know about this, and did he allow it to happen anyway in order to be able to have an excuse to go into the Iraq War, similar to what some people say about Pearl Harbor, that FDR knew it, but he couldn't get the American people angry enough to join the war, so he allowed Pearl Harbor to happen in order to get the support that he needed. So John was focused on issues above the little trivial things. And the same
You,
was true. People would ask him, so who do you think killed Kennedy? And they're thinking, who fired the bullet? And John is saying
yeah.
he's saying the Joint Chiefs of Staff had Kennedy killed. like it didn't. He used to say something like, "There's the
Yeah.
hand, and then there's the person, controlling the hand, and the one that you should be interested in is the one doing the controlling." So he felt some of these squabbles were a diversion from really looking at the main issue behind it.
Right. Now, this I'll bring in is I'll say how I met John Judge. And it was maybe I only met him once, but it made a profound effect. Who could not have a profound effect from meeting John Judge? It was
Absolutely.
at a School of Living Community Land Trust gathering at the School of Living Center in Heathcote, Maryland. He
Hmm.
was a member, maybe an advisor on the board of that for a while. So when we go to that bigger picture, and you say, well, who really done it? What was their
Uh-oh, you
motive?
froze
What is
again.
their vision? Okay, I froze again. So the bigger motive, the bigger picture,
Yeah.
and I pretty sure John is the one who worked with co-founder School of Living, um, Mildred Loomis, and School of Living had the Green
Yes.
Revolution publication. And I found that publication when I was with you that day at
I
the
know
Hidden.
you and Mike were so
Remember how
excited about
excited I
signing it.
was? And that was like I went back to the 60s, that publication that I then found. It showed those four charts that show the economics of war and peace, which then I later had designed into a nicer visually appealing four
Mhm.
charts because it was really rough. But he probably did help with Mildred to design. And economics of war and peace goes from how we form how a peace economy builds into control through the land and the money problem. There's points of guns
Froze.
above both of those blocks, land and money, and then how that builds into gross wealth inequality and builds into a full steam ahead imperial war system by graph 3, chart 3, and then how to create a new form of democratic governance, new and improved, that made the role of governance to have money as a public utility, not for profit, not usury, and the land as fair share rights, working with shifting taxes off of labor and production and onto the unearned income that accrues to land and resources, rooted in our housing unaffordability, our homelessness. I mean, you said, Marilyn, that he also included a lot of social problems. So
Yes.
you see, he not only saw the problems like many do, but he saw them in such depth that he came to a very clear solutions, deep restructuring of the economy
Yep.
way ahead.
Absolutely. I think Ralph Busoni helped to develop those theories too that you were talking about in the chart.
I don't know. I never heard that. If he did, he's never really affirmed what I'm talking about here because
Oh,
I
okay.
met him and I organized a lunch for him in
Oh,
Philadelphia when
okay.
he was running for, although he did, knowing he was going to have a little fundraising lunch with us afterwards when he had a major,
You frozen.
I don't know what to do about the freezing. Let me see. So I had lunch with Ralph Nader. Afterwards, he spoke at a big event at the
Bersodi.
Well, Bersodi was also a founder of the School of Living Land Trust, and Ralph Bersodi
Yes.
uh, had the Henry George economics. That's
Yes.
land trust movement came out of Henry George economics and Mildred Loomis. So they were deeper into the money problem, and Henry George had addressed it, but he was deepest in the land and wealth inequality problem. So back to Nader.
Oh, yeah, so you're talking about two different people because you said Ralph Bersodi and then all of a sudden it was Ralph Nader, and I was wondering whether you
I thought you said Ralph
misspoke.
Bersodi.
Well,
It's
you were talking about Ralph Bersodi and then you talked about Ralph Nader, and I was
Oh,
wondering whether
my mind glitched. I was telling the story. Marilyn mentioned Ralph Nader, and then my mind glitched to Bersodi because I'm in that same realm of School of Living. But it was Ralph Nader I was talking about having lunch with in Philadelphia. And I did not mean
okay,
to say Ralph Bersodi, but that's also connected, Carol. So we
okay,
got to lay that out a little better. Okay. So Ralph Nader, after our lunch and then our fundraising lunch, were about 10 of us. gave a major talk at a university there, and he did mention Henry George, but he has never brought anything really forward. I mean, he might have had a glimpse of it, he might have had a conversation, but publicly, he's never gone there. Rossetti's never addressed, to my Nader, Ralph Nader, never to my knowledge addressed the root structures. Ralph Nader. He never addressed the root structures of economics of war and peace.
Okay.
All right. So anything more about this amazing John Judge before we hear some of Marilyn's poetry?
I have a quick question. I am only asking this because my subject deals with what I consider to be the history preceding 9/11 that nobody knows about. That's very important. It is never brought up in any conversation I have ever heard about 9/11, and that was the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan as the predecessor in 1979. If that's something that John had any focus on as a special issue containing important hints of this setup of political Islam by Zbigniew Brzezinski when he was basically made Carter's national security advisor when he got into office in 1980 in January. And he was able to literally, he privatized basically the entire CIA operation, the covert operation, and got it under his control. And he was able to operate without anybody monitoring him. This is Brzezinski as his national security advisor. Carter was completely in on it. He's the one who basically allowed it to happen. And when you look at that history, and it was, I mean, when 9/11 happened, we were saying, we've been screaming about the importance of Afghanistan, since 1979 and what the Carter administration did, and it's still actual connection that people bring it in as a foundational event. That if you don't understand that event, again, when you want to get to who was really, quote, in control, all right, Brzezinski was basically David Rockefeller's favored neocon, and he was the one. They were the ones who chose Jimmy Carter to become president when he was the governor of Georgia, and he was invited through the Trilateral Commission that Rockefeller had created with Brzezinski. Okay, and so these are all the big players that preceded all of this stuff that's all downstream. So anyway, I'm just curious if that registered at all with John.
It probably did, but I haven't come across it yet. We kind of put the 9/11 things to the side and worked on other issues. I was advised by a couple of people that was like a third rail.
Well, it's not anymore.
In History Center about 9/11, that it was going to offend people, it was going to cause divisions, and they just told me to kind of avoid it. So I have filing cabinets full of 9/11 stuff, but I just haven't really opened them or dealt with them too much. I've been kind of focusing on other issues. But I'll bet you anything John would say yes, that he saw that connection, because he didn't miss many connections, I'll tell you.
I'll put a pitch for your need for volunteer help here. Anybody who can show up like I did one day and help sort out these papers. But I kept getting stuck on interesting articles, so I don't think I was much help.
I've had other interns tell me that, yeah.
I do want to add, though, that I did invite Paul to speak about Afghanistan at the San Francisco International Inquiry into 9/11. And also Graham McQueen, who also sadly passed, who was an amazing scholar, really fantastic. Graham also worked with John Galtung, and he was in Afghanistan prior to 9/11. And he knew that they were preparing for war against Afghanistan. And we do know that 9/11 was used to get the support for the invasion into Afghanistan. So it was obviously, connected to that. Although they did use it as well to invade Iraq, which was, really horrific.
Yeah, no, that's true. Dave Ratcliffe has a new book out called Understanding Special Operations. It looks like a Bible. It's like 682 pages or something like that. It's like this thick. And it's based on some interviews he did with a gentleman named Fletcher Prouty.
Yeah. He actually came to an event in San Francisco just in the wake of 9/11 that was organized by a friend of mine, and she had Michael Rupert speak. And Dave had that book. I've got a copy from him then and there. And that was when sort of coalesced in San Francisco.
Yeah, someone told me recently there's quite a few divisions right now in the 9/11 truth movement.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, although at the same time, we have more evidence than ever, and we've got more visibility than ever, and it's more international than ever as well. So there's all these contradictions, but I think it's natural. I think the more visible, the more powerful it is, then the more it gets attacked, and the more they try to divide, weaken, and dismiss it if they can. And that's one reason prior to recording this, I was asking you about John Judge's parents, because John looks so deeply into the CIA and the intelligence agencies, and I was wondering if his parents were also involved in the publisher of Trying Day Books, who published Paul and Liz's most recent trilogy. His dad was CIA too, and sometimes people have a deeper grasp of the machinations of intelligence agencies, and I've gone even deeper into 9/11 more recently in trying to understand what's happening right now with all the current covert ops and all sorts of events that are happening, and just learning more about how they work and how much control they have over the narrative and the psychological operations and the different layers that people have to see through to try to get anywhere close to the truth of what's actually happening.
John's mother told him that she was told to draw down her estimates as to how many people they would need to draft because they were going to reduce their involvement. But the amounts were reduced. And then she told him that then later the amounts were increased again. And John said, when did that happen? She said, like the Monday after Kennedy was assassinated.
Wow.
So, yeah. So she didn't tell anybody that for a long time, but just about the time she was passing, she told him that the amount had been reduced with the intention of getting out of Vietnam, which Kennedy wanted to do, and then all of a sudden reversed as soon as he was killed.
Oh, well, Marilyn, before we turned the recording on, you'd mentioned John Judge's mother. Just to say that again, what John Judge's mother profession was there at the Pentagon? What was her duty?
Her job was to estimate how many soldiers were going to be needed in any given month or year. Like, we expect to have this much attrition, and we expect to have this many people die. So how many people do we have to draft?
Wow, that's a pretty important job.
People had to be drafted in order to meet those quotas. Yeah, I would sort of call it military intelligence. I don't know if that's exactly accurate, but that was her job, was to estimate how many people they had to draft in order to meet the requirements of the war. So, yeah, she was not at all happy with John's activities because she worried it jeopardized her job because he was protesting the war, and getting involved in, and it was the opposite of what she was trying to do. So she was always very worried about him doing that. For a long time, they didn't get along too well because of his.
But she didn't actually want him to go fight wars, right? I mean, it was
no.
And how did he manage to get out of the draft?
I don't know that. I really don't know. Part of it could have been a student deferment, but then after that, I don't know. I don't know. I know I had a husband. Seriously, he went to his physical and they said, well, you're a little overweight, but we can take that off you. And he said, well, how much would I have to weigh before I would be 4F? And they said, probably 100 pounds more. So he came home and started eating and eating and eating and eating, and he gained enough that they rejected him and made him 4F. So I don't know if John was big at that time. I don't know if that could have had anything to do with it. I don't know. I feel like he had some problems with his feet, maybe. Not sure. I really don't know. That's a good question. I'll have to ask a couple of his friends if they know the answer to that. Because I still am in contact with at least a half a dozen of his college classmates that support us, and
Yeah.
a lot of our
Yeah, if
support.
you could find out, that would be really
Would be interesting.
interesting to know.
Maybe he was able to get out under conscientious objection
What
because
was
he was
what year?
specializing in that and working with other people on that. So that's also possible. I'll have to find that out. Now you got me curious.
Could you mention what year he was born? John was born in.
He was born in 1947.
Okay. All right. Because
Oh,
of,
wow.
depending on
1
the
year
age.
younger than I am. I was born in 46 and he was born in 47.
Yeah. That would increase your chances of being drafted over being born
And there were
later.
also the lottery numbers at that time. My brother drew lottery number 19, so he was almost certain to get drafted. People 300 were very unlikely to get drafted. So I don't know what his lottery number was either.
Yeah.
That might have had an effect on it. Most people don't even know about that, but there was definitely, I remember watching it on TV when they drew all the lottery numbers.
Marilyn, where do you vision the Hidden History Center being in 10 years, imagining it's where you want it to be in your highest and best vision of it?
That is a very good question, because right at the moment, there's no real sustainability plan for what's going to happen to it if something happens to me. And I'm pretty troubled by that. I asked Dave Ratcliffe one time, I was thinking about, I own the stuff that's in the center. He left it to me. So the nonprofit was created to curate it, care for it, catalog it, whatever, but it actually belongs to me. So I was thinking about leaving it to the corporation. And I said to Dave one day, I said, well, suppose you woke up tomorrow, I was dead, and I left you this collection. What would you do? And he said, well, I would come down with a big U-Haul, pack it all up, take it up to Boston and put it in a storage room. And that didn't satisfy me. I mean, I felt like that was the opposite of we have a lease agreement where John signed it, what he wanted done with this material, and he wanted it preserved and promoted and protected. And, I was not happy with that. So I actually don't have a plan. I have one of John's old friends from the conscientious objector days in Georgia who's looking for different possible things that could be done. When he first died, we went to the University of Dayton, which is where John went to college, and offered them the collection. And they said they couldn't take it. It was too big.
Oh,
They said we have an ethical obligation to only take on projects that we can care for, and we don't have the resources to do this. So I have not to take on this. I mean, if somebody had the money to finance it, it could be perpetuated that way just by having, an executive director that's paid instead of volunteer like me, and people who really were involved in preserving it. But we're not finding anybody so far or a solution for that problem. And it troubles me almost every night because I'm like, what is going to happen if something happens to me?
right. And that center where you have it, that building seems to me a pretty good place to have it. But of course, you're paying rent. You're paying rent, aren't you, all the time, every month?
$1,590 a month.
Oh my gosh. Well,
what about any of the academic centers that do peace studies and have are those a possibility? I mean, maybe they're all in Canada or out of the United States, because I think of like the too. And I guess Graham McQueen started the Peace Studies program at McMaster's University. But
one of the problems is that I could probably if I split up the collection, I could probably find homes for it.
Oh
I could
no.
probably find somebody interested in the JFK stuff, somebody would be interested in the peace work, so, but I didn't really want to do that. I felt like the integrity and the identity of who John was would be lost if we split it up and gave it several different places.
I agree. So why
Not
don't we
crazy.
just all, since some of us are real interested and we met Marilyn now, we know the situation, just keep in mind that maybe at some point, Marilyn, you'd want to organize a Zoom call conversation with a group of us and put a very clear vision that the collection stay together and how to make that vision happen, and also keep organizing it so that it becomes I think, a really important resource center. And there in York, even that has some very interesting United States Revolutionary War history. I mean, as a working museum, a little working museum on this fascinating topic, I think even the city of York should look at it. So let's move on, if we may, unless there's any more input on John Judge. I would still like to have us hear some of Marilyn's poetry. She said it'll be challenging to switch from the one side of her brain to the other. We understand that poetry is very different than John Judge's work, but I would like to bring her poetry forward.
I actually kind of solved that problem a little bit, because the one piece I do want to read is about the 50th anniversary of JFK's assassination.
Wow.
It's like my reflections on what happened that day when we all went. It was an amazing thing. I mean, I took the train down there because I'm afraid of flying, and there were people on this train. Everybody felt like they had to be in Dallas that day. We had 350 people at our conference that we organized, but there were many, many, many more people that just wanted to be in Dallas that day.
Which day was it?
I mean, they had on November 22nd of 2013, 50 years after he was assassinated. I mean, there were things like snipers on the rooftops in case there were problems. It was just quite a mix of everybody was there talking, and I was trying to get some sense of what that was like. So I don't know. It's hard, a little bit hard to get my poems when you don't read them on the page, but it's called Tribute in Rain because it rained that day, which made it even. You would think people would maybe stay away or something. No way. It was just. Everybody felt like they had to be there. It was a generational thing, a historic thing. So I just put Tribute in Rain for John Fitzgerald Kennedy, November 22nd, 2013. Memory has its own moment. This day, nothing can stop it. Not the icy rain, not the barrage of photographs, not a cataclysm of SWAT teams, not even hordes of narcissistic commentators chattering into microphones. This tribute happened by its own compulsion at the time of this horrific onslaught. It happened despite the chill wind, the orange barricades, the counterintelligence agencies, the fanatics, the bizarre lottery, even the snipers on the 9th floor of the Hotel Lawrence. For on this day, in the slow blur of history, a president died, and his widow mourned. His dream was postponed. Evil rejoiced, and his shattered skull and her pink hat were etched on the tablet of time. This memory is irrepressible, so the tribute happens anyway. Crowds come from around the globe. Despite 50 years of despite the mayor's edict, the drooling guard dogs, the lunatic histrionics, the mockery and triviality, and even the ingenious claims of solution. Memory is a force of nature, but so is truth. The deluge of re-examined evidence persists, and the ghosts in the hallway of Dallas will not rest until the questions are answered and the blue glint of betrayal is traced to its source. In a whirlwind of controversy and name-calling, this tribute happens anyway. Nothing can stop it. Not the mounted police, not the scrutiny, not the security checkpoints, not maudlin souvenirs, not threats of incarceration, not disinformation, not even 50 years of carefully calculated bread and circuses. For on this day, in the slow blur of history, a president died, and his widow mourned. Evil rejoiced, and his shattered skull and her pink hat were etched on the tablet of time. So I tried to catch some of that, the chaos kind of. That's what people went to see. I mean, there was such a camaraderie of people. It was really amazing. But that's
Thank
just
you.
one.
Which
I
of the-
have a little booklet of poems that I wrote because of John, but that's just one of the ones that, and that's actually in my third book. It's in The Great Silk Void.
Oh, that I was wondering where it was.
Yeah,
Okay, The Great Silk Void.
yeah. I
That's a
published
power.
that a couple
Yeah.
years before the one you're talking about, the Angel for the Fireworks poem about writing poetry.
Okay.
That Angel for the Fireworks book, when I fell, I had time to kind of start to go through and organize my own papers and documents and that had been written 50 years ago. It was so old, it was typed on a typewriter way back before computers. And so that's what I started with in writing the book that I just published, was the manuscript from like 50 years ago. I had to go through it and make it the 21st century instead of the 20th. And I had to make all kinds of changes because there wasn't an internet back when I wrote it. But yeah, that's where that originally started, was my thoughts over the 50 years of my life of writing, what it's like to write poetry and what you're trying to accomplish and things like that. So
That is
so
such a deep book. Thank you for sending it to me.
oh
I
sure.
mean, how do you call it? Like, it's like a philosophy of poetry. It's like
Yeah.
understanding that poetry, how it lifts up the human psyche and how transformative it is. And uh, I, for one, have only fairly recently really valued poetry. And a lot of people just don't get it, like, oh, it's just like, no, it's profoundly important for culture and for truth and for emotional intelligence, not just mental, but emotional intelligence. Would you say? And I
Yes.
think that's what
Yes.
your last book, which you said I had no idea, was that book encapsulates 50 years of your life work.
Yes. Sure does. Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of it has to do with trying to capture in words, capture reality in words. And it's not easy to do. As to what word is exactly right here. What do I really want to say? Am I on the right track as to what I really want to talk about? Sometimes you start the poem and it sort of ends up someplace you didn't expect. It kind of surprises you.
That's the flow of it, where the
Yeah.
poetic sensitivity flows the subconscious and superconscious dimensional aspects of mind. So it's emotional, but it's such a deep dive. A poet being in the flow, like you say, you don't even know what's going to come forth. So that's where the prophetic voice of the seer is so clearly. You did a great job of using the mind to explore those transpersonal dimensions of poetry. It's an extraordinary
Yeah.
book. And you used to teach poetry. You were
I
teaching
did.
poetry. So
When
you
when
brought
I
all
first
of
got
that
out of
to it too.
college, I taught poetry. But then later, after my husband died and I got involved in writing these books, I went to local poetry groups and did readings and that sort of thing. And then I taught workshops to adults, writing workshops. So that if I do another book, well, I have two in mind. One would be, yeah, I'm only 80. My mother lived to be 95, and my grandmother lived to be 105. So I'm just getting started. But anyway, that's one of my books would be taking all the prompts that I create into like maybe a spiral bound volume that people could go through and work through the exercises, and it stimulates ideas for poems from your memories, or from the feelings you're having at the moment. So I'm thinking about doing that because that'll be easy. I've got all the exercises. I basically just have to pull them out of the drawer because I saved them all after I taught the class. I quit teaching it when I got involved with John because he kind of consumes you. I got involved in his work, and kind of set my poetry aside to some degree. But that's one of the things I'd like to do. And I'm working on another book of poetry. I probably have maybe 25 pieces that I've written since The Great Silk Void was published. So I might get to that. But if I do, I don't think it's going to be quite as thick as the others. The other three are all like 160 pages long. And I don't think I'm going to get anywhere near that. Plus, in writing the book I just did, I reminded myself about some of the basic principles. And now I'm a little aggravated with some of the pieces I did because I'm like, wait, they don't stay true to that. I lost sight in some ways of some of these things I really wanted to focus on. Huh. So it brought me back to poems. I'm like, no, that's not it. No, that really doesn't. No, that's not it. So I'm trying to refocus my own energy, as to what I would like to do. So, but I think probably the workbook will be next. So.
Oh, amazing. Where do we find your work besides ordering your poetry books? Maybe online, but do you have a website
yet? I'm working on a website. I don't have them on Amazon. I'm working on a website, but I'm kind of stuck because I don't have any skills in that direction. And I kind of need like some kind of web person. I've got it started. I've got pictures of each book and information about each book. And, you need some kind of mechanism for people to order it. Right now, you could just write to me and tell me you want a book.
So your books aren't yet on Amazon. Why not? What's preventing that?
Just time to figure out how to do it.
Well, okay, let's all keep what would support Marilyn in bringing forth her work. I mean, one of my organizations, we have a webmaster in Costa Rica, and she charges only $10 an hour. So you're not going to find many people do that for only $10 an hour. Yeah, Carol's going extraordinary, but she exists. And sometimes there are people in other countries like India designed a cover for my book at a very affordable price. So let's keep in mind, let's get this great poet's writing available, okay? And also support for Hidden History Museum and the Highest and Best Vision, or Hidden History Center being a working center with John Judge's work. So any other poems you wanted to read before we close the recording, Marilyn?
Just a lighter one.
Okay.
It's called Paper Dragon. Never wake a paper dragon in the middle of the night. He will arise enraged. For you see, he cannot understand what paper means. He thinks he is a threat to you. A real reptile with turquoise scales, powerful thighs, and vicious nails. He's a party display at a New Year's parade, but he thinks he can tear you apart. Never wake a paper dragon in the middle of the night. Do him a favor. Let him sleep. Let him keep his fantasy of fiery conquest far and wide. Or if you must awaken him, at least pretend to be terrified. Cower behind a bush and scream while his massive mouth is snarling at you and drooling confetti spit, while the yellow spikes on his back are standing on end and menacing you. Never wake a paper dragon in the middle of the night. Or if you must, do him a favor. Never tell him he's paper.
Wow! That's both light and heavy. Oh my goodness.
To the government, you can go, yeah.
I nominate that for Donald Trump's motto. I think that describes him perfectly.
But Marilyn, that one's so beautiful. It makes me want to paint it or draw it. I mean, it
Oh,
just has to
wow.
be illustrated. It's just such a
Yeah,
beautiful, exquisite little
yeah,
poem.
yeah. Well, I recently did that using Easy Peasy AI, uh, the fire horse little video, 16 minutes, and it's very easy to generate. So just imagine, Marilyn, you could take that, we love it, and easily
Yeah,
turn it
let
into,
Alana do her easy peasy magic.
yeah, just we'll use my Easy Peasy account and we'll just, wow, that could be really, I mean, it is, Carol, like extremely visual, isn't it? I mean, it just flows in your mind to see it all. That's fun. Wow. Anything else before
Yeah.
we close the recording? I guess it's to say thank you, Marilyn. You're wonderful. You're
Yes, thank
amazing.
You're
And
you.
you
welcome.
stay healthy and live long. We want to keep
I'm
Live
keep
long
working
and
on it.
prosper. Yay.
yeah, live long and prosper.
Ah, yes.
Okay. So thank you, Marilyn. I'm going to
You're
close the
welcome.
recording. Thank you, whoever listened. Any closing statements, please, everybody make. Otherwise, hearing none. Thank you, Marilyn. And everybody stay on a few more minutes after we close the recording. Thank you. Bye.